Really?
Yeah, man.
That's epic. What's the name of the aim of the game for you in that? Is that content creation?
Yeah, basically. So I started. I had a really interesting interview with a lady who runs sort of a podcasting school for business owners, and she said you can either have a podcast for your business or as a business, and this one is very much for the business, and it's basically what's good about it is that I got a lot of stuff to do. I can't, well, I could, but I'm not constantly coming up with new ideas for content, filming it, editing it. So the podcast allows me to make one or two long form shows per week and then repurpose
Yeah.
that content in multiple formats. And also just asking a few good questions, you get to leverage great information and knowledge from people like yourself. So I'm using your ideas for my content, not having to think of anything new, which is great, and just interviewing smarter people than I. So yeah, man, that's basically it. And we hit 100 episodes last week. Your number 101, and
Woo!
we're gonna we're gonna double it up because I've always wanted to get my clients interviewed as soon as they're on board with us. But then we've got a backlog of bookings like 6 to 8 weeks on the main show. So just double up the filming.
Very cool.
So
That's awesome, man.
there's your answers. Okay, well, we are live streaming. We're recording. That's all good. I'm just very excited. Should we rock and roll?
Yeah, ready when you are.
All right, let's do it. Welcome back to the Coaches to the Moon podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Episode 101. We're now doubling up 2 episodes per week whenever we can, and we're kicking off the first Tuesday podcast with a very good friend of mine, Mr. Joseph Bonanno. Not Italian, he is Sicilian, hailing all the way from Mermaid Beach in Queensland, one-third of the evocative mental fitness crew. Joseph and his team, their mission is to help people become radically alive, live authentically, and empower people to stay above that mental health line in the workplace. So excuse me, I've got a cough, but the details I've got here is that Joseph lives with his partner Sarah, their 3 cats, and their 5 chickens. This is a busy man. Joseph, Bonnano. Joseph, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for the warm introduction, man. Appreciate you having me. Thanks for the opportunity.
Good. I thought it was far from perfect because I got a cough halfway between it, but we're live and I never claim to be perfect on this show. So why not expose our vulnerabilities as much as possible, something that you and your team, I imagine, are quite well versed in. So firstly, mate, we've known each other for a few weeks now. I think you're a really lovely guy, and I think you and your team, Kyle and Blake at Evocative, are just a huge pleasure to work with. So I just wanted to throw that out there to start off the podcast, give you a compliment.
And we love you. Joy to see you, and you're always hot on the topic with compliments, so it's good. Yeah.
Is there a conscious decision to have 3 very different hair lengths in the business? Yourself being none, Kyle in the middle, and Blake long and luscious.
Sat down deliberated over for a long time, actually. No, it just happened that way, man. I don't like having to do my hair. Blake's always wanted long. The industry was never able to grow it out because of machinery and stuff. And Kyle has had the same haircut since 10 years old, so he just doesn't change.
It's been really interesting watching. So we run ads for Evocative, and it's been really interesting watching which ads perform the best, depending on who's in it. Which one of you 3 guys? Not a situation we get with most of our clients because there's normally one of them. So it's been really fun. But it's a pretty even split, to be honest. The ones with all 3 of you smiling and looking professional, they're the ones that do the best. So let's get into that today, man. I just love to just quickly check in on something I touched on in the intro there, which seems like a minor detail, but I think it's actually quite important. Living a, quote, quiet life with your partner Sarah, your 3 cats, and your 5 chickens. So a lot of business owners that we talk to, they're working all the time. They're on the hustle. They're on the grind. And things like pets, chickens, hobbies don't seem to, come into their life too much. Now, my family and I, my wife and I, were doing our very best to have a thriving little vegetable garden, help our daughters learn to plant stuff. We'll get some chickens when the time is right. Just talk about nature and get out in that a lot. I think it's hugely, hugely impactful on my own mental health as a guy who spends all my life on a screen. For you, how does having, a nice, quiet, nature-based life surrounded by loved ones and animals, how does that help you to disconnect from the ups and downs of running a day-to-day online business?
Yeah, great question, man. It's something that's very important to my early in my 20s, after from where I'd grown up, which was in Mackay, Queensland, which is very lots of ocean, Great Barrier Reef just around the corner. Lost touch of that, I guess, chasing this financial pursuit in the sales industry where I previously settled, and getting tied up with the life. But what we're all about at Evocative is trying to help level to stay above the mental health line, and I learned the hard way. I think Carl did as well. He doesn't have as much of a story around it, but that, these intrinsically important to us as human beings. Looking at trees or getting exposed to natural sunlight, and therefore intend to, like chickens that produce our eggs or produce our dinner, it's a part of the human experience that, and it has a massive impact not only on our mental health, the hormones and the chemicals that are produced in our body when we interact in that way. The science is very clear. Incredible benefits all around. No downsides. And my partner works in animal welfare. 5 chickens and the 3 cats is really not a negotiation. Too, so we're happy with that.
You got the voice of an animal lover, calm and soft, and just you make me feel safe around you, Joseph. So I think that's completely right. You said there's no downside to doing it. Although growing your own vegetables is significantly more expensive than buying vegetables until, for the first 2 or 3 years until the ratio flips. But I believe, it is much easier to not do these things, right? It's much easier to get your food off an app, to get your workout at the gym or off a YouTube screen at home, to do everything under lights, indoors, and often the effort of, caring for animals or figuring out a way to just add a little bit of self-sufficiency into your life, or to indeed go out on the weekend for a hike or for a camp or even just a dip in the ocean, as opposed to sticking around on the couch, which is so easy and attractive to many of us. What keeps you, except for the fact that you said it's good for your mental health, right? Because we all know what's good for our mental health, but still we don't do it. Right? We all know what's good for our physical health and don't do it. What gets you up to do the challenging things that make your life better? When you've had a tough week at work, what is it that helps you to wake up in the morning and challenge yourself physically, do the things that are not the easiest things to do? And I'd love you if you could just unpack that a little bit for us, please, mate.
Yeah, for sure, man. And there's quite a lot of aspects and elements to that I can answer with, but I guess that knows it is a necessity. A place a long time ago where I was very, very unhappy. Didn't like myself. I was constantly pretending to be someone else in order to masculine culture that I'd been born into to pursue in the sales world, and Mackay is quite a rough town, cane farmers, small town kind of beer, fist fights. That's what people like to do, and you can tell by I'm quite gentle by nature, and I like to look at things. So as an adolescent, not really feel in those ways, I turned to of a tough guy with a bit of bravado, and I used my language often to kind of
orders of gaining people's approval and making.
And unfortunately,
a naughty crowd, started using a lot of drugs.
Started at a very young age. 12, I was smoking weed every day. 15, I'd done just about any mainstream drug under the sun.
No career prospects. All my friends were going to juvenile hall, up in the hospital on a regular
basis. Really bleak kind of.
For me at that point, I was introduced to the world of boxing, which is
the world's #1 hardest sport, if you weren't aware of that, to make it in. So
boxing did miracles for me as a young
man. It gave me confidence to protect myself and to be a strong.
Also, the most valuable thing that it gave me that was
positive. Inspired to be like and model, who weren't tied up in all of
accustomed to drinking and drugs and committing crimes.
So I guess that's where it probably started. This worked out really quickly. If I smoked weed in the morning and then I went to the boxing, I'd
go under the bloody nose.
And that's a pretty good analogy for kind of.
Fortunately, boxing didn't get me out of all of my bad habits
straight away.
To hang around with
the wrong crowd and get up to all sorts of mischief.
We were, when I was 18, and myself and Blake and Carl,
sorry, we lost 6 of our close friends.
Mental health-related deaths inside of a 6-month period.
Others outside of that period as well. This kind
of suicide ran through our hometown,
which was as 18-year-olds, we had no idea how to navigate that or what to do and what's
it coming up. I confronted death.
I've had loved ones and family members that have passed before then, but people with so much potential, was really
that no one is safe from this.
The healthy individual was contracted to the Cowboys to go and play professionally.
No one's safe from this, right?
And I realized after going to those funerals and attending these people that we loved so much, that a lot of my friends and
were still using drugs at the funeral,
still drinking them,
still doing all of these toxic things, pretending to be all that
were invincible, that I believe was a big catalyst.
And feel like they wanted to stay in as well.
That theme kind of, I kept getting these big wake-up calls. I almost
hit over the head in a nightclub and had a seizure. And
spent a couple from that and had a 6-month journey to full recovery from that, where I couldn't drink anymore. I couldn't do,
which was a blessing in many ways.
And I pivotal moments in my life that have really
us, I guess, and said, hey, listen,
kid, if you keep last. And to what you were speaking about earlier, we do live in such a...
Everything has been made easy. We can have whatever we want at the click of a button.
And live a totally sedentary...
Make money from our computer screens and never leave the house.
I get really depressed really quickly if I don't go outside and engage not only with the wild, but with people. I'm so fortunate to have an amazing partner.
Business with that with and have
meaningful conversations with on a regular basis. That's what and
getting in a boxing ring
was having a vulnerable and tell them how I was actually feeling, because I didn't know what.
Someone he's going to come back with the right.
But accept you for your deepest, darkest insecurities, and that's.
I'm getting on topic here, but
what motivated my pain that I've felt, that
belief that physical
incredibly important, and getting out and engaging in the world like is
crucial. If we don't,
we we soon see a deterioration of our
well-being. And it's really amazing.
We work with an organisation called Atlantis Recovery Centre, and they're on the forefront of launching this massive worldwide mental
health. And
in there, you can go and you can do these different meditations, and you can one of my
forest. And while you're in your living room, you can walk around the forest, and
you can see birds chirping, and you have this amazing experience of like you're actually in nature. And what the studies show in the
instantly lowers heart rate,
lowers blood pressure, lowers stress levels throughout the body and the system, so we're able to
equilibrium. I think we're all working so hard
to, but unfortunately we've become accustomed to, oh, I've got a headache, I'll take Panadol.
I'll get McDonald's, these quick fix,
instant gratification that aren't treating the root cause.
Thank you. It asks as many questions and opens up a whole lot more, which is amazing, man. So thank you. It's always interesting for me on this show over the 100 episodes, how many people in the coaching and personal development industry have had such a troubled past like that. And there's definitely a vein of, not coincidence, a vein of similarity between how and why people start their coaching businesses to help other people off the back of some shit that's happened to them. So just quickly, what was the name of that company, the organization? Atlantis Recovery Center. That's so interesting that they're using virtual reality as a mental health, supplement almost, because during COVID lockdowns and everything like that, it became so nerve-wracking for me that maybe my daughters would grow up in a world where everything's virtual, everything's remote, and virtual reality is how we have our meetings at work and how we have, how we go to comedy gigs and rock concerts, that sort of thing, all through VR. When will we ever actually experience anything where we can just sit back and just plug ourselves in? That's super nice to hear that they are doing that, because it's not always that easy just to say, go to the forest, right? A lot of my mates live in the city because that's where their work is and stuff like that. And so for me, I don't need the city, so I live, in a big outdoorsy suburb. But if you do live in London or in the centre of Sydney, or Queensland, you can throw a stone and hit the ocean, basically. In the cities in Queensland. But that sounds like a really, really helpful thing. So back to your journey. How old are you now?
26 this year.
Or 27 this year, sorry.
26. Okay, so 8 years since the horrible 6-month period where you lost all those friends. Starting Evocative, that didn't happen straight away, but I imagine that there was a seed planted. Can you tell us about when you and Kyle and Blake decided to start Evocative off the back of everything that happened to you?
For sure. Have you heard the story before?
What I've read was I knew about the losing the 6 mates in 6 months, and that was the inspiration, but I don't know if I've heard the actual sort of sit down around the table to start the business.
Obviously, going after that experiences, we all in our own rights, and we've always been in our
kind of thing, but we were never super close.
We lived at home, we partied together occasionally, and sort of and friends that loved each other, but not thick.
About a year later,
no, it was a few years later, in 2019,
was still in the contact, and they started a
t-shirt company making party shirts, flamboyant and amazing and cool festival going Australian made shirts, and
so their business plan got slaughtered, and they weren't well versed at the time with online
sales and creating e-commerce businesses. It didn't work out the way that they wanted to, but with the money that they did, they donated almost all And we did this really big run. The first time we did it was 2019 or 2020. Was 100
run for your life
from Southport to Byron Bay, and run for your.
And the slogan was even in dark days. And after doing that and not having
a lot of success in the team, they had some chats with their own mentors, and I wasn't involved with
selling investment properties here on the Gold Coast
and getting a lot of PD and doing my coaching and stuff like that. And then their why was always to help give back to mental health.
Needed help.
And they were using the shirts as a,
I guess, a demographic
that we as these outlandish, wild children that we're all too familiar with in Australia.
And we were all those kids.
And the intention was always to help.
Let's transform this, because t-shirts really...
We love fashion, they love dressing up nice, but they were really passionate about helping people, so they went
and working with individuals and athletes who wanted to
form it, different systems and frameworks to them that would help them to do so and navigate the stress. And Carl moved around that time, around 2020, 2021-ish, and I
started running together and going on hikes and stuff because we both love.
I know a lot of people here either because we're boys from North Queensland, so
cool to have a friend from home
that knew me from school, and we could, you know, and he
about this business and about what they were doing and how it was
unfolding and what they wanted for it and the for them to help.
Can wake up feeling purposeful and inspired
to do something that they're passionate.
It became
clear that working with one-on-one clients for
a month wasn't
the fastest or the most optimal way. And I started talking
in business selling. I was selling investment properties
to people who were specialists who would then supply to a customer. So
a lot of sales and getting a message out there
and approaching business owners and CEOs from just your everyday people. And so
that sales cycle, and at this time I'm still working property.
And I'll help you do it, and you know, you
matter with friends, and I love this, and I believe in your mission because
I was already invested in this world and wanted to, but I just wasn't sure when. I was also very
another investment property and get myself set up financially.
You know, and throughout COVID, things got really
tricky, and so
I left. Ultimately, I left that investment property, and
I had all these different job offers to stay in the industry, but
I knew that my purpose was to.
It was the only thing that actually lit me up,
and I knew that I could do for free if I had to. And so I said, fuck it, I'm going to come work with you guys. And then that's when I guess the mission to influence businesses became our thing, because we realized
businesses and organizations,
we're not
one-on-one
intimate experience with an individual that needs help, but
in which they spend 19,
20, which has a much bigger impact, you know, because now they're not just seeing us once a week, they're seeing us every.
They're invested in this journey as well.
We're making them offers to remind them of what's important to them.
Track with this mental fitness mission.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah. No. Okay. Sweet. So you came in as a bit of a sales guru, and now you're part of the mission, and I love it. It's
yeah.
You're a really great team, and I think that your switch over from one-on-one clients to not just helping business owners, because a lot of people help business owners, but helping them to then help their teams is great. Helping the workplace as a whole, which is really cool. Mental fitness definitely something that can be missing from a lot of workplaces, especially with remote work being a factor as well, where we are sort of pseudo connected to people through a screen. I've never met you. I've never met Flordelisa. I've never met Christian, the producer of this podcast. I've only met one of my staff members, right, in person, which is bizarre. And I've got like 10 people on the team. So it is definitely quite tricky. What I'm interested in is, because you guys have got a breadth of experience running these workshops now, I would love to know, when you're running these workshops, what's the most common sort of myth or excuse that you come across that people use to avoid addressing their mental well-being head on?
Sure. Before I say that, I just want to cover something.
When you were talking about not only working with business owners, but the business,
which is a really big important part of our mission,
because we identified the same thing. We were working with people that had they were working with individuals. They were working with athletes and see
crushing it, you know? But what happens to the barista?
What happens to
the receptionist that deals with all of the
angry clients all day long, all week long, for 52? They don't get any of this stuff.
Maybe someone in their life that helps them with this stuff.
But we, the organization, we work with every single person.
Yeah.
Top down.
But the people at the bottom need this as well. So when we do those work, whole teams in there, no one.
Important to us because we've all lived that, we've all experienced
Our boss investing in personal development
and we don't get to go because we're at the bottom of the rank.
And I don't think that's right.
Yeah.
Health, mental well-being, because it's a pandemic.
It's
aren't safe from, regardless of their status or stature. Or
lowly position. To answer your question, most common objection.
And it's funny because,
I think growing up in Mackay, everyone's... No, I'm right. I'm all good. How are you?
Very surface level.
I think Australia is like that on a general. There's no real intimacy or vulnerability.
Fortunately, most successful business owners,
and this is changing obviously with
people that are becoming amazing entrepreneurs,
but most business owners, and they've been really indoctrinated into that way of thinking. And
so the most common objection
I get,
place is fine.
Our culture's fine. We go out for beers every Friday. Do you know what I mean? And we have a ping pong table. Is a funny one.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, okay, cool. So because your team gets
play ping,
means that they're mentally healthy,
or they deadline
and lose sleep over the amount of work that
they have to do, or how they are being placed, or how they're being made to feel when they work.
The most common one is that I'm truly
pleased.
Yeah.
And it's true, and they mean it. Because I always ask a follow-up question like,
for mental fitness, or for your workplace culture.
We've been working with this organisation for years, and they've helped us
around identifying our purpose and having
constructive and receiving feedback in a healthy way. And that is like awesome.
You are already getting the service because the world needs it.
But oftentimes it's the latter. It's not beers and barbecue. Like culture's not near. And I can just tell you that's what people I work with, and they're not into what's available.
Do you find that is prevalent across men and women? Because that feels like a very kind of, Yeah, it feels like a very masculine, bottle it up, kind of come back from the war and don't say anything sort of thing. Just have a couple beers and avoid sort of vibe. No, I'm not surprised to hear you say that. So, something that I kind of touched on and you've addressed a bit is that the screen time thing, people with remote work, and not even just remote work, but with technology, a lot of us still have work with us when we get home. We can't really escape it because of our phones, because of our laptops. That's why I've tried to move all of our business into Slack, because no one uses Slack for social media. So that when you're in Slack, you're at work, and then when you're off Slack, you're not at work. And I'm trying to, help my team and myself to differentiate, put those bookends on the work day by when you're not logged into Slack, you're not at work. And I think it's working really well, because I never find myself just messaging my team at 11 p.m. when I have an idea just to remember it. I know that they're not going to see it till tomorrow, which is a good thing. But on that, a lot of coaches listening to this show most likely won't have a team at an office, but will have one or more virtual assistants, or their team is remote overseas, that sort of thing. Can you possibly share with us a simple exercise or practice that we can do as online business owners just to help our virtual team stay a little more connected? And I'm asking that for the audience, and mostly for myself, because I really truly care about this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. It's a great point, because
do work remote these days, I think, especially in this world,
right? The most powerful thing, like there's a million different things that you can do, but the most
effective,
there's another one that I really want to share as well, but the most
thing is really, and it sounds fluffy,
and all of the big wigs in this industry of personal development and business development and growth talk about it nowadays.
It's getting clear on why you are doing what you're doing,
why it's important to you as an individual. And I'm talking to the coach or the...
It's really important that you get clear on that, crystal clear on that,
in a way,
share that with your team,
or your virtual assistants,
with your clients, everyone, tell the fucking world.
Because you need to remind yourself of it, because inevitably we do have hard days where we don't get enough sleep,
or the chickens are gone
missing, or and so, why am I showing up today again?
I want to help change the world, to encourage people to be more purposeful and inspired,
and completely eliminate suicide. And that's something
very unlikely.
But Cynic says it's the infinite
that will continually drive us to
always be striving for evolution, growth, and progression.
Sharing that with your team,
and then understanding what's important for them.
That you want to work with this organization. How do you see
yourself with our big picture purpose
that we use?
But before asking that question, really taking the time, worksheets that we send people to go through and start to think important to them. How do they want to be remembered as a human?
Characteristics they want written on their gravestone.
Big heavy of thinking, because we want people to be thinking about what is it that actually matters. And sometimes I'm
not aligned with this company's mission and vision at all,
because they're not going to be inspired to work hard for you and
their life if they stay. So cool.
I love that you would
find something
that fulfills that for you. And the second thing, the
most simple way I can put it is FBI.
Is
how to
effectively communicate conflict and have,
when necessary, around or
things that people have done to piss you off. And when I say FBI, again, it's Simon Sinek.
He made this acronym famous. Its feelings, behaviors, and
impact. feelings that have been created for you as an individual by an interaction? What are the behaviors
interaction? The more specific that I want you to say
in the lunchroom when you, and impact. How did that impact you, and what is the future in? Hey,
yeah, and it could be a positive thing as well. But
you use
that framework
to have more intimate conversation.
Wait, who was nice today?
Nice work. Good job. Hey, Alex, this morning when I jumped on the you made me feel so warm and welcome.
Jumping straight into business stuff and asking me a little
Bit of personal
to see how I'm feeling as an individual.
That made me feel so comfortable with you. For me is that I feel more open to share with you, and I
be with you and to be myself when I am with you. No.
Can you see how I use that frame?
That sounds like
a really big kind of thing. Have that framework, I would think, how do I give this guy a compliment?
You're thinking I'm trying to hit on him or something like that.
Because we're all a little bit uncomfortable about this.
100%, and that would be my next thing, right? When I was working in restaurants, when you were working in sales, automotive, without the boss setting a tone, without the team leader setting a tone in the workplace, for you to walk up to someone and say, "Hey, Darren, when I rocked up at my desk this morning, I really appreciated that you actually brought, you brought me an extra coffee. That made me feel very safe in the workplace." And not that just it's a place of business, but that we're a team. Darren would call you a fucking pussy, for saying that. Most likely, and that's often a difficult thing for empathetic, probably more open and vulnerable individuals in harsher workplaces. Do you believe that it becomes the job of the team leader? Well, I'm sure you do. I suppose, how do you believe it becomes the job of the team leader to help make more open conversations more accessible and normal in the workplace, and outside of just ringing up evocative and getting a workshop? How can they take those FBI principles and start to, I suppose, make their team feel more comfortable having these conversations?
Yeah, for sure. Well,
The biggest, which is the same with anything, in a leadership role, there's only one way to lead, and that is by example.
Stuff.
And the reality is,
not so sentimental.
And places where my boss has been,
and like a
big brick wall that I can't get past. But that's okay. If he had this hindsight, I think he would. I'm unique, and so are all of these other people. So I need to make it safe for people to not only be vulnerable, but also if they don't.
Necessity to do anything, but you need to give people the opportunity,
Because in the middle of all of us, we are.
And we're soft and squishy creatures that
belong evolved as social animals, and whether it's through a screen
face, we desire
affection from other human beings, so much so, more than any.
It's the number one predictor of early
mortality.
Yes.
So you can often feel lonely at work in a room full of people if no one's talking.
If you just have that, "Hey Bob, how you
doing? All right, see you at lunch." That's not a relationship. You
don't have any connection or any dialogue or
any real individual. And whether we deny it or not, we love that. We all want more of it. It's why we have
children, because they're so
loving and affectionate. They
need to consider that, okay, there's going to be
people in here that are thoughts and feelings and emotions, and that's cool, but there's also, especially
in this younger demographic, I'm
26, as we said, my age or under, are just becoming a lot more emotionally vulnerable and susceptible to all of this stuff.
Why? There's probably a million different reasons, but
You need to
feelings,
because if you don't, they're going to leave, or they're not going to feel safe, and they're going to sabotage you. They're not going to trust you, which is the really big thing. If you want
trust even.
so start with empathy, start with vulnerability.
The important piece there is a lot of people think that
Comes before vulnerability. Like, I need to trust you, Alex, before I. It's the adverse. We need to be vulnerable with someone, or we need to have someone be vulnerable with us before we see them as trustworthy. Because it's like, okay,
that's right.
Massive point. That is a really interesting point, and I probably haven't thought of it that way before, but I love that. Vulnerability comes before trust, not the other way around. I heard a really interesting thing with on the 26-year-old, becoming more emotionally vulnerable thing.
Yeah.
I listened to a book, and I can't remember the name of the book or who wrote it, so that's helpful. No, it was called Understanding Women. It was by some lady called Alison something, and she has another one called Understanding Men, and it's just basically a recording of a talk that she's giving, and she talks about how between the two halves of your brain, there's like a barrier of tissue, and the closer, it's like the further away those parts of the brain are, the thicker that tissue, the more emotionally open you are, which is, it's bonkers neuroscience, and I'm going to butcher this completely. But the funny thing is that in women, at the beginning, when they're younger, this tissue is thicker, which causes them to be more emotional. Teenage girls, that sort of thing, crying over movies and Harry Styles. And men, drinking beer, footy, fistfights, and Fosters. Not that anyone drinks Fosters. And then somewhere around middle age, it flips, and women's starts to thin and men starts to thicken. And so as you're getting older, men, you'll notice, older men may start to cry in a movie that they never have before. And women, maybe in their careers or because they've now got kids or finances, they start to step more into a more masculine close off as they have to do more things in their life. So I'm not sure the evolutionary reasons for it, but I thought it was super interesting because I can kind of see it in my own parents sometimes. That my dad's potentially more emotional than he was when we were little, and my mum maybe less so, which is very interesting. And that's the extent of my neurobiological knowledge there, Joseph. So I will not go any more. But do you guys jump into science at all, like as in neuroscience stuff in your talk? So are you more exercise based, as in physical, like not physical exercise? What I'm talking about, like running exercises.
It's definitely a combination of both.
Kyle is a engineer by trade, so he statistics and science and making sure that things are true
and proven.
So have the stats and the science for us.
In towards the experiential process.
If I feel something to be true to me, I believe it wholeheartedly and I'll die for it. Whereas Kyle needs to see the facts and figures, the numbers and the graph. In
order to establish that. So there's definitely a blend of personalities in that way.
Yeah, we like to, I mean, it's always more powerful if you deliver a statistic and then
how this process is going to help them to achieve the same result.
Because it just shows proof, right? Like, okay, this guy.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, we use it that way.
We don't conduct scientific experiments. Not yet, anyway. Working on it.
No. Well, that's you need all levels of that, because I've noticed that in the coaching space and the sales space, certain people are very analytical and want to know those answers. And it sounds like people like yourself and me, we don't always have those answers because we're just like Why does that matter? Just do it, right? But you get a Kyle, and if you have a Kyle in your workshop, you need a Kyle to talk to that person. You need to be able to speak to them on their level analytically and tell them why it makes sense, which is super interesting. Just from a purely, because we always try to throw some business advice into this podcast, being that many coaches have the dream for impact, but not the business skills or acumen yet to make success out of that business. In learning so much about mental fitness, workplace awareness, different personalities, I know that you have a sales background. What can you tell us about what you've learned about selling a product or a service to different people based on how much they like to open up, how much they like to share, how closed off they are, that sort of thing? What's the connection between the two?
It's massive. I mean, was the first taste of psychology. I got to understand and see, a bit of science about how psychology impacted people to share or not share, because you're constantly trying to extract information from someone. And it's the same thing in a therapeutic process. You're hoping to win their trust and you can help them. Often people don't want to share that with you. I believe coaches, women in particular, because they're tender and they're more vulnerable, generally speaking, make better salespeople. And I wasn't any Grant Cardone, but I did really well really quickly because I could meet them with slick hair and a cigarette hanging out my mouth in the car yard, and I would greet them with a handshake like a family member and say, "How are you today?" and what can I do to help? Hospitality background before I got into sales. It's just about that connecting with them on a personal level. I think you're asking me a more practical question though, which is what are the different? I think for me, my role has been to meet people where they are and to keep politely encouraging them to share more with you and give you more information. And that I trying to make sales, call them on their shit. People will share I'm having XYZ problem. To the end when it's time for us to discuss working together. Your problem, they say, I don't think it's really your money excuse. I need to talk to my mom or my dad or my partner or whoever. Hang on a second, you told me just before severe levels of stress, you're not sleeping, conversation with your partner anymore. Money can't be an objection here. How much is that worth to you? That's priceless, right? And calling them out on why they're there, because oftentimes people have this being asked for the business, which is, I'll think about it. I'm not interested. It's like when we walk into a retail store to get a pair of blue jeans for a party, and how can I help you today? What are you looking for? But you're there for a pair of blue jeans. Matches your white shirt. Recognizing that the first response is often not the real response. And just asking, okay, can we clarify that a little bit? A sales trainer, Swish, Ryan Tuckwood, he's an amazing guy. Which is called a Rita, which is which is elegant and beautiful and very gentle, and it's appreciate, relate, isolate, and overcome. Look, I appreciate that money's a bit of concern over this, and I can totally appreciate that you're in this situation because I've been. And I just want to confirm though before you tell me that you have all of these issues that you're looking to solve, is it only the money that's stopping you from making this decision? So I haven't covered for you. Yeah. Cool. Give you the real answer. Sometimes I'll say, do it. Cool, then you can help them overcome that with a payment plan or a cheaper service or an
the next step on the ladder.
I can't afford it. I'm out.
Not the truth either. It might be all of these other things. It might be that he doesn't trust you.
You haven't delivered enough value. You haven't answered some of their potential questions. It's too early, so it's always good to just check.
Yeah. Vulnerability comes, building trust through vulnerability, through relatability, that sort of thing. I think it's really interesting seeing you as someone with a really tangible sales background break down the similarities between the two, because you're right, everything's quite surface level because there's so much stuff going on in everyone's life. No one's got that much time to go deep on stuff. So that's why I love talking to someone like yourself on this show, where you can answer that question for 5 minutes and, dig a little deeper. It's really cool. And that's something you've done for this whole show today, Joseph. I don't know if you realize, but we've been talking for nearly an hour now. That's gone very, very quickly. But I've really, really enjoyed everything that you've had to say today, and I really appreciate you sharing with us. We're going to be putting all the links and everything that people need to contact you and learn from you in the videos and pages for this episode. Do you want to just quickly let the people know about the 8-day mental fitness program that you've got going at the moment?
Yeah, 100%.
It was 8 days of mental fitness in 8
minutes. These are just really simple. We like to make things very practical.
So very simple, which really can learn
in 8 minutes and then go and implement it. You towards more mental fitness.
The 8 steps of the evocative system,
which is empathy and changing your state, optimum health.
It is continuous improvements like Kaizen,
all little things that we can do for this. A is ask, which is
eating health and kindness.
Evoke a time.
A really simple framework for you to learn how to
supercharge your productivity and your time management. Change my world in the sales industry if you haven't already got a system.
Time. I is
integrity, understanding it, and then sharing your ethics. And V, lastly, which is
powerful vision, which is our focus again, which we touched on before.
But super simple, 8 days, 8. Get them in an email, little frameworks that you can do and share with your team as well.
Love that. And I know because I helped to build the program that on the 9th day you've got a sort of an email template to then send to your team to kind of introduce the fact that we're going to be working on this together, which I think is great because I can imagine that it could be difficult for a business owner to then take these topics that they've learned and then teach them back to their team. So I think it's really, really cool, man. I know that's on your website because I put it there for you. So Joseph Bonanno from Evocative, thank you so much for being on the show today, mate. I really enjoyed it.
It was an absolute pleasure, man. I really appreciate you having me.
On the beach sometime.
Oh, now on the beach. Goodness me. Have you got room for a wife and 2 toddlers in your house as well, Joseph? Maybe. Yeah. We can just put the cats, the chickens, and the toddlers in the garden and see what happens. Babysitting. That'll be fine. Anyone listening live or on the recording, I love you very much for that. Thank you so much for making it possible to get to episode 101. There's plenty more to come. 2 shows a week from now on, as I said. So keep listening. I'll be back next week with another amazing guest on Coaches to the Moon. One more time, Joseph, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And for everyone listening, see you next time. Much love and peace out.